Shut up and sit down.
We're pleased to welcome Alan to the podcast today. Alan, who are you, where are you, and how on earth did you manage to get roped into this?
My name is Alan Gibson. I'm the minister at Motherwell South, and I got roped into this by Kenny, who is your assistant for the day, Stewart. And Kenny is a member of the congregation at Motherwell South and a very active member of the congregation at that.
Brilliant. It's great to have you on the podcast. Kenny's obviously mentioned bits and pieces of things that have been happening at Motherwell South as we've been having conversations with other people. But I'd like to take you back. We've asked the same question of everyone to the Sunday before lockdown, or the kind of days leading up to that. What kind of mood did you sense in the church, and what were your kind of thoughts around about that Sunday when we knew that something was going to change, but we weren't probably very sure just how much at that point?
So it was really strange for us, Stuart, because we had our stated annual meeting just prior to lockdown. And so a lot of the content for that had been written, and a lot of the digital content had been put together in the weeks before that. So we had a hint that the world was changing, but not to the extent that it then did change. So it was bizarre because we stood at the stated annual meeting and we delivered these, a review of the year gone by, but also projections, financial projections, looking forward in mission, discipleship, education, worship, to what the next year would bring. And it was almost with this sense of, we've planned all of this, but we're increasingly aware that none of this is actually going to come to fruition in the next year. So there was a kind of a despondency as people were delivering these reports, and this realization that, well, actually, our whole rental income is not going to be £30,000 next year. It's unlikely that we will be able to embark upon this project, which we have invested a lot of resources of time and talent and money into, because it now looks as if the world is changing, and that, of course, has come to pass.
Mm-hmm. So in that first week, then, so that's a kind of unusual place to start, isn't it? That you had taken the opportunity to look back and look forward, but then knowing that most of it's not going to happen. So what were your priorities going forward into that first week then?
I think the priority for me was to make sure that the worshipping community continued in some form or other. From that point of view, we tend to use a lot of technology in our worship. We would normally have videos during a talk, or there would be things on the big screen. So we've got the editing software. We've got that capability there. So it was really just a case of, right, how do we move everything that we would do on a Sunday morning to an online congregation? But more than that, Stuart, it was also a case of thinking about what works for an online congregation, because what is applicable for an online congregation is not applicable for an offline congregation. So it was trying to make a service that would have an impact with an online congregation. So it had to be shorter, it had to be slicker, it had to be in much quicker segments, it had to be faster moving, but also have some kind of reflection and impact. And also making sure that even things like what Bible passage we were choosing, how is that speaking to the changing world that we're in today? So that was the immediate priority. And how do we care for people?
Okay.
We're aware that suddenly people are going to be thrown into this world that's a shock to everyone. So what are the needs that people will have, and how do we care for them in Christ's name?
Okay. So let's start then with the worship bit. So you're very aware that things need to be different. So was your kind of primary concern for the people who were already coming on a Sunday morning? Was that your kind of, I suppose, I don't want to say target audience, but that, you know what I mean? So it's about continuing provision for them, or did you have a sense that this might change who's engaged with what happens if you move even more online? Because you already were putting clips and stuff online already, weren't you? You were kind of sharing pieces from the service on Facebook and.
Yeah, we recorded the service and we uploaded that to Facebook. So we already had a fairly well-established online congregation which comprised of people who would go to church anyway, plus a few others who didn't go to church. I think the focus initially was to create a worshipping community for the existing congregation online. That evolved over the first 2 or 3 weeks where we had restrictions, because we then realised that in actual fact, like many churches, we realised that the people who were engaging with worship were not just our normal offline congregation. We were having people watching the service who wouldn't normally be part of the worshipping community. So it then became a case of, well, how are we actually engaging with them? And you have to think about everything. The rule book goes out the window. You have to think about liturgy, church speak, how to avoid church speak, how to explain biblical passages that you might normally assume your congregation would take for granted that they know the background to it. So that was a challenge. That was a huge challenge.
That sounds like a lot of hard work.
Yeah, but good fun in a sense, in that you were just having to completely rethink church.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's a very creative problem to have to solve, isn't it? It's not necessarily. I think what's been interesting, everybody we've spoken to has had, obviously, it was a lot of pressure. It's a big shift, but at the same time, it's a really creative process. It's not a bad problem to have to solve.
You're absolutely right, and that will be the challenge for the church moving forwards. Is what have we learned during this by way of redefining church? We you and I have been part of the church for a long time, as has Kenny. We've been praying for 20 years for change in the church during a time of decay. Mm-hmm. Now, all of a sudden, that change is happening in such a radical way and with such alacrity that there are some of us are suddenly thinking, wait a minute, it's not actually the change that I wanted. It's not the change that I had perceived for those past 20 years, but it's change. And so we have to adapt and we have to go with it. And the litmus test will come in the months ahead when we say, well, what have we actually learned about all of this, and how have we adapted as a congregation, as a church? What new innovations have we adopted well? What is there in our past that we can now let go of, and how do we move forwards from this?
So, what, in terms of the worship that you've created, what have been the kind of key kind of factors? What have you been looking for, and what do you think makes good online worship? What are the elements that you've tried to?
What we've been doing is every Sunday after the service, we send out a questionnaire to people whom we know have engaged with the service. And it's a fairly simple questionnaire. It's basically an evaluation form, because this is new territory for us. And I think it's folly to assume that you have suddenly got the correct recipe for this. That's not the case. You have to, like anything in life, you have to ask for feedback, and you have to respond to what people are saying. So we're seeking that kind of feedback and saying to people, right, what's good about the content? What's not good about the content? What about the timing of the service? Should it be live streamed, or should it appear at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning? How long should the service run for? In terms of content, what are you looking for? And the feedback from that has then informed how that worship has evolved over the last 8 weeks. So every week we try something different. We go for something new, and we try to adapt it. The other thing that I've been doing, Stuart, is looking to see what our colleagues are doing online as well. So on a Monday, I will spend 5 or 6 hours on a Monday looking at everybody else's Facebook page to see what they're doing, and making my own informed decisions about what works and what doesn't work. I do not think that standing in your church and doing what you would normally do on a Sunday morning and delivering that online is conducive for an online congregation.
Okay, so why not? Because some of our colleagues would argue that what they're trying to do is by doing that, is to provide something that's familiar for the people who have already been there, But also, I've heard the argument that at the end of this, whenever it ends, if we create something that's entirely different, then there's no bridge back into church. So anybody that has joined in that kind of online world, if they were to walk into our church on a Sunday morning, would be completely baffled by the whole thing, because it bears little resemblance to what's happened online. What do you think about that?
Maybe the question needs to be reversed. Maybe the question is, do we go back into our churches on a Sunday morning?
Yeah.
We have, and I'm not foolish enough to believe the analytics that we see on YouTube and Vimeo when we upload our stuff, but we have round about 800 people clicking on our service most Sundays. Now, I know that success is not measured by numbers. That's also a fallacy. But those 800 people, well, it's not 800 people for a start. It will quite often the same person will be clicking on it multiple times, especially if it's me or somebody else is involved in the uploading of the service. You want to make sure it's actually working. But when you actually look at the analytics, there's about half of that are actually watching the service all the way through. That's more than we would have on a Sunday morning. So we're clearly engaging with a much wider congregation than we would normally. So yes, there's a dichotomy there. In the one sense, you are trying to retain a sense of community, a sense of worship, a sense of the familiar for the traditional Sunday morning congregation. But on the other hand, there has to be that outreach dimension to it. We are trying to redefine church and establish new ways of taking the gospel message to this new congregation who have suddenly appeared. It's a juggling, it's a balancing act, and I'm not saying that I've got the answers to it. I'm just saying that it's a journey that we're exploring, and we're trying to identify where are we going with this, and ultimately where is God leading us with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I guess we've spoken in the church for years and years and years about creating new worshiping communities, and everybody this year was supposed to have created a fresh expression by the end of the year, and we all did it in 3 days. When somebody turned the church off. But the imagine, and you're right, the kind of future stuff that we've talked about for 20 years didn't look like this, which I find really interesting. It looked like people somewhere together, probably. Uh-huh. It might have been different groups of people in different places at different times, but it was physical. It was, people gathering together in different ways and expressing their faith in different ways and creating their own worship and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, we've kind of completely blown that model out the water. And we have, as you say, 400 people watching a service across a week in lots of different places. Most of them perhaps aren't even in your parish. So what, where does that leave us?
I don't know.
Yeah, but it begs as many questions as it gives answers, doesn't it? How do you minister to people that you've never met, that you might never meet in person, that don't even live in this country, all that kind of stuff. While at the same time, we recognise that that's how people live their lives now. I was looking at stats last week. More people got married last year who met online than met in real life for the first time. So that's people's lives. This isn't unusual for people now. It's just that the church hasn't really kind of recognised that that's what everybody's doing. So all of a sudden we've been thrust into this world that other people have been in different ways for a long time. Yeah.
And again, on that point, I think that for so many of our colleagues in ministry, we have adapted. We have grappled with the technology very quickly and are making it work. There are many, many ministers who would never have used technology, who've suddenly been thrust into this position, and they have adapted and they have adopted the technology. And I think many of them are to be commended, because it's suddenly a new world, and we're going by faith into this new world, not really knowing where we're heading. It's like Noah in the ark. We're boarding this ark. The conditions outside the ark aren't exactly terribly, terribly pretty with this virus that's battering us. The conditions inside the ark for many aren't terribly nice. We're in homes either on our own or are with people, and we're spending far too much time with those people, and it's beginning to grate. But we're on this journey, and at some point we know that we will see the world with new eyes. We just don't know what that world's going to look like yet.
Yeah, that's a brilliant analogy. I'm going to steal that. You mentioned grappling with the technology. One thing we've asked everybody is, what on earth are you using to make this happen? So what are your kind of go-to bits of kit?
For the technology, I use my laptop, and I use an editing software called Wondershare, which I bought its original form. It wasn't called Wondershare, but about 15 years ago it was a kind of embryonic software program, and I've always had it. I've always updated it every second year or so. I've tended to update it, so I know the software quite well. You can do transitions between all your slides, and you can edit films accordingly. And people send me their Bible readings by WhatsApp. And we have people doing prayers. We have people sometimes telling us how life has been changed for them during the shutdown. And again, it's trying to create that sense of community online by reminding people of the faces they haven't seen for 6 or 7 or 8 weeks. Somebody telling us from the context of their house how family life has changed. We also always ask them the question, how has your faith been affected during this? And that's the kind of punch. So the last 2 or 3 Sundays we've had this slot where somebody says, my family life has been affected, my working life has been affected in the following way, and then here's how my faith has been shaped by this. So,
and those have been really interesting, and I like it, in the kind of sense that it's deliberately more than just people, doing what Christine did there, just waving and saying, "Hello, we miss you. It's nice to see you." That's a big question.
As well. Give me a minute.
Yeah. It's a big question, though, isn't it? It's a huge question around about, who are you, and how has this, it's impacted all of us. But we, part of the reason for the podcast is to find out, well, how has it impacted all of us? And what you're doing is the same thing with your congregation. You're asking them, so, we're 7-8 weeks into this now. What's that like for you? And how does it feel? And what does it make you think about God and life and your family and work? And those are big questions for people, aren't they?
Yeah, and everybody's context is slightly different. So it's good to hear from people who are doing the homeschooling thing with their children and the struggles that come with that. It's good to hear from people who live on their own and who haven't been able to get a hug from their grandchildren for the last 8-9 weeks. It's good to hear from people who are on furlough. And it's also good to hear from all those people about, well, my faith, I've questioned my faith, or I've found that my faith has been strengthened during this time. A lot of people are saying that they have suddenly found the time to be rather than to do all the time, and that's had a profound impact on their faith. So allowing people within the context of Sunday worship to share their story is probably not something that we would do terribly often on a Sunday morning, if I'm being honest. I don't know why. It's maybe a feeling, but it's certainly something that in Sunday morning online worship during the last 8 weeks, that has resonated with our online congregation. People write or email and say, yeah, that had a profound impact on me, hearing that person's story.
Do you think one of the things about being online that people kind of anecdotally say is that it allows us to be just a little bit less inhibited, perhaps? So we maybe say things that we wouldn't normally say face to face because we're talking to a screen, and obviously there's a face on the screen, but it's not the person sitting in front of you. That's a different kind of thing. So to be able to be just maybe a little bit more honest or open or encouraged that other people have already done that, whereas to stand in front of your peers on a Sunday morning, that's a scary thing for anybody. But to talk about how you feel and how your life is and stuff in front of everyone, that that can be quite daunting. But to do that with someone that in your family holding your phone in front of you and filming it, that's a different kind of conversation, isn't it?
It is, and we've certainly heard from people in our online worship in the last 8 weeks whom we would not have heard from on a Sunday morning. They would have been too daunted to stand up in front of the congregation. and whereas they feel more comfortable about speaking to a camera or speaking to their mobile phone. So it's allowed us to incorporate into worship folk who would not previously have been involved in worship.
That's brilliant, isn't it? And it speaks to, one of the first concerns that you had was to not to create, but to maintain and to support the community. But within that, you're allowing and enabling the congregation to support each other by telling their own stories.
Yeah, it has certainly allowed us to get to know each other as a congregation at a deeper level than we did previously. And that sounds bizarre, that as soon as we go into this isolation bubble,
yeah,
in some respects we've actually got to know each other better because we've been more open about our faith and sharing it with one another. That Presbyterian way of maybe not always sharing our faith inhibits us on a Sunday morning, whereas now, without the congregation actually there, we suddenly seem to be just a wee bit more open and a wee bit more able to talk about our faith.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The
Yeah.
kind of sociology of that. I'm sure there are books and books around the psychology of
yeah.
all of that, but it seems to be common. That's not unusual. So that seems to be happening in lots of different places.
Yeah.
What so one of the things that fascinates me about what's happening is the idea of the question, what's next, in terms of if we've created an online worshipping community, that could be, I suppose, one of two things. It can be content that people consume, or it could be a community that people participate in. And so how do you think we continue to build that community? Because I think, there's enough content for everybody forever. You were saying you can sit and watch 6 hours worth of services on a Monday morning. There's tons of it now. I suppose the question is, how does that lead people into discipleship?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, again, we're breaking new ground with this, so it's a tough one. I've been very blessed in that I have a worship team in my congregation, which is led by a lady who is remarkable, and she has almost single-handedly taken on the discipling of people, which has allowed me to focus on the worship and the pastoral side of it. And what she's done is something that has just evolved through a need and a desire from the people to whom she is ministering. She sends out every single day a prayer, a Bible verse, and a thought. She does it by email, so people are reading it. That group started with 12 people in it. As of this week, I think we've now got about 98 folk who subscribe, or just short of 100 folk who subscribe to this daily letter that goes out, daily email that goes out. And through that, there is this thirst for people wanting to enter deeper waters of faith. They want to question. They want to discuss their faith. They want to go from those shallow waters into something deeper, and that's manifesting itself through that group who are receiving the daily email, to attending Zoom meetings on a Wednesday night where there's prayer and Bible study, engaging with each other. Sometimes there's another group which meets during the morning. So they're looking to join in with that. They're looking to meet with people. And again, there's that lack of fear, Stewart, about seeing people on a screen. They're not looking at folk in a room. They're not having to contribute to the discussion if they don't want to contribute to the discussion. So we're watching that grow as well within the church. Now, there's nothing strategic about that. It's not as if we sat down and said, yeah, we're going to do this, and we're going to think about how we grow disciples within our congregation. It's happened in a very natural, kind of self-evolving way. It's a spirit-led thing, I do firmly believe. And I'm actually quite happy as a minister just to kind of sit back and think, well, actually, I just enjoy watching it happening. Because there's something happening, and as ministers we're always tempted to be involved and to kind of control things, but actually it's quite good just to say, oh, actually I'm not in control of this. This is happening without Alan Gibson's involvement, which is probably why it's flourishing. Don't laugh, Kenny.
It does freak you out a bit though, doesn't it? That's very different from where you said you started from this Sunday where you were presenting all these plans that had been carefully made, and they were good plans. They come out of a long period of reflection, of previous practice, of assessing need, of conversation with people about what was going on and all that kind of stuff. And yet, here we are with this completely unplanned period of time, and things start to grow from that. And that's not entirely accidental, I don't think. There has to be something about you being content in the first place to let that happen, because I think, sometimes you can strangle growth as quickly as you can encourage it by sometimes being a little bit too quick or too controlling or too unwilling to let someone else go and send out an email every day before some people would want to see that every day and to edit it and to all that kind of stuff that we get into occasionally, and I'm speaking for myself sometimes too, because we want to know what's happening, and we want to know that it's okay, and we want to know that everybody's been looked after, and there are no problems. We have a kind of a culture of management sometimes in the church that doesn't allow for that kind of spontaneous stuff to happen very well. We put policies and procedures around about things for the best of intentions, but sometimes they limit rather than encourage, and we've been very good at that over the years. We mitigate against change very, very effectively in our structures. So sometimes it takes something maybe like this that has no structure or is completely out with the structure, just to happen, and then to allow us to kind of almost catch up with that, I think. But within that, we have to. One of my colleagues used to talk about our job is to plan spontaneity, which I think is a fabulous phrase. Because it sounds bonkers, but it's kind of true. It's to create the. It's like having a party. Parties don't just happen by themselves. You have to have a place to have it, and food and drink, and you have to invite people, and you have to create an atmosphere and all that kind of stuff, and then the party happens. And I sometimes think, our job is to partly to be just party hosts, to create those opportunities for people to come together and have a good time.
It's a good analogy, and you're absolutely right. It's that ability to step back and to let talents flourish within your congregation. If people have an idea, let them go with it, because now is the time to try new things.
Mm-hmm. It's the old adage of fail quickly. You want to try something, have a go at it. If it doesn't work, fine, but make sure you learn from it. Like, that's what the church has been horrendously bad at, is it's fear of failure, because you know what you know. It's that age-old adage of you know what you know, and that's what a Sunday morning sometimes can become. But then the fresh expression idea that we've been talking about for weeks now is actually give it a go and learn from the feedback you get that you've been gathering after every Sunday. Learn from what other people are doing and tweak it so that it becomes what fits your congregation's needs and your worshiping community's needs, and learn from it and use it and make it into something that's a lot bigger than a lot of us could ever have hoped or prayed for. That's the thing that excites me most about it, is the fact that church, every person we've spoken to so far is talking about how the messages that are being put out are reaching people that they normally wouldn't reach. And reaching people in a way that deeply affects them spiritually, emotionally, whatever that's going to be, and giving them that opportunity to talk about it in a safe space and share it in a safe space. And even just like something I was going to come on to, like we've started doing like the church pub quiz on a Sunday night. And it means that Christine and I have gotten to know people. Now, granted, there are people that we know of in the congregation, but there are people in that group we, on a Sunday morning, would maybe say good morning to and talk to or wave across the congregation. We're now spending 4 hours with them on a Sunday night having a chat. And that just wouldn't have happened before, and the communication that we've now got as a group of youth group and Sunday club leaders and things as well is 100 times better than it ever has been in the past, because I don't have to worry, and Christine and I don't have to worry about jumping in the car and driving to Motherwell for a meeting. And people that are in Straven don't have to worry about you. You can all dial in and you can all be happy, and you can phone in from your bed in your pyjamas if you want to. but you're still contributing effectively. And that's what this is. It's really taught me that and I've used technology for work for years to do calls with remote sites and people in London and people in America and whatever. And it's that age-old adage of when you enter the church door, you more often than not forget about your professional life.
Yeah.
And actually, the church has an awful lot to learn from how places like that do stuff. And that's what this is beginning to hammer home for me, definitely.
I like that, here we are, we're having this conversation on Zoom, which is a tool I had never heard of 8 weeks ago.
Yep.
I'd never heard of it. And yet half the churches now meeting on Zoom. And when it went down Sunday morning, half the church didn't meet. But do you know what I mean? There's, businesses, schools, universities across the world have been using this tool since it came out. And yet the church had no idea it even existed. And that's not to say that we didn't know of other things, different tools, but it sometimes... it's like anything else. You look around and think, well, what can I use to do this? And, Alan, you were saying you've got a video editing suite that you've had for years. And so that's a comfortable thing that you can just go straight to and think, right, I know how this works. That's great. I was kind of the same. I've got a Mac, and so iMovie over various kind of iterations. I have a rough idea how it works. Never done a lot with it, but I knew roughly how to, drop and cut things and press the button to spit out a video at the end. And yet, here we are discovering all this stuff that can help us, like Kenny said, but that people in our congregation have known about for years.
Yeah.
It's...
And that's not to blame them for it.
No,
it's just a case of maybe you've never thought that it would be a good idea for the church to think about doing this. Because... Again, Presbyterians love the way it's been done.
Yep.
It's kind of...
My very first job at university was in Kirlook, just up the road from Motherwell and from Stonehouse. And I worked for a youth project there. And one of the first things I did, it was 6 churches that were funding it. And I went round all the churches and I asked people, look, if you know about something that you think might be helpful to young people, can you let me know, just to build up almost like a human library kind of idea of people that would have skills and stuff. And 3 people came forward with, good stuff. And but I'd grown up in Kirlook, so I knew quite a lot of people. And I kind of went to some of them and said, why did you not come forward? Well, I don't really know anything. And one of them was my auntie, who was the boss at the job centre. You're kind of thinking, if that's not relevant to young people, then what? And sometimes it's just about making those little connections, isn't it? And helping people to see that what I know could be useful in this context, because I use it over here, and that feels very different from over here. But actually, transferring some of those skills can be hugely important, and we see that in all kinds of places. Presbytery, we see people who know about buildings and property and the law and all that, human resources and stuff. And if we didn't have those kinds of skills, we'd be lost.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely
Lost. How has your worship changed in 8 weeks then? Has it? You talked about feedback and evolution, and so how's it different from that first Sunday to what you're planning for this week? What would the changes be?
The changes are probably a lot more participation from people in the congregation. So the first 2 or 3 weeks were very minister-led, minister looking to camera, filming, a wee bit of editing and uploading. Whereas now, this Sunday's worship will probably involve 4 or 5 different people. There'll be 2 people talking about how COVID-19 has affected their faith and their family lives and their working lives. There'll be somebody else doing a Bible reading. There's somebody doing the prayer this week, but they're writing the prayer and they've recorded it on fast forward, so it's a really, really quick. So it's a 60-second prayer, but it's all written out and they've got wee diagrams and stuff. So just, again, it's ways of changing the way that the worship is projected, so it doesn't remain the same all the way through. The first 2 weeks, probably just me speaking to the camera. So it's changed a lot.
The other thing that you mentioned at the start in terms of priority, as well as worship, was pastoral care, looking after a community that you now can't go and visit. So how has that taken shape for you?
Well, that's quite funny, because we've been talking about all the innovations in worship and the developments in worship. And I think at the very beginning of lockdown, we were full of big ideas, like a worship. This is what we're going to do. These are the innovations we'll implement. And we then realised that actually a lot of the ideas were too big. We couldn't possibly have fulfilled those ideas. It's always good having big ideas, but actually delivering them would have been far too demanding on a small congregation with a fairly large parish. So all we've done is we've done the opposite to what we did with worship. We've gone back to basics. And we've asked our elders to phone your district every second day and check up on them. And actually, they're doing it incredibly well. So we're doing something very, very simple, but we're doing it very, very well. And I know that because I phone round folk as well. And one of my questions usually during that conversation is, have you heard from your elder? And 9 times out of 10, it's, yes, my elder phoned me yesterday. So the elders are just keeping in touch with people and phoning them. And again, that's been great to watch how that has just happened without any great steering or control or influencing. There was one email at the beginning saying, this is what we suggest. Care for your district. Love them. Mm-hmm. Share with them. Phone them. Listen to them. And that's been happening.
That's fantastic. So what... how do you think your elders feel about that?
I think that they feel that they are fulfilling their pastoral call to eldership. For many of my elders, they're saying that they've developed a far closer relationship with the people in their district. One guy described it to me as being, the last 2 or 3 years, he has this kind of brushing the surface relationship with his district, where they do the usual. They talk about the weather. He sees them 3 times a year when he goes and delivers their magazine. And he's been saying to me that relationship with his folk is deepened profoundly. It began with a phone call every second day. There are some folk in his district whom he now arranges to get them a fish supper on a Friday night because he knows that's what they like, and they're self-isolating because they're elderly and they're vulnerable. So he gets them the fish supper, takes it and leaves it on the front door, and he's developed a relationship with his district that he would never have had in 1,000 years.
It's amazing, isn't it, that, in kind of both senses, in terms of, I've talked about deepening relationships through worship, but also through pastoral care. As soon as we're not allowed to speak to one another in person, it seems as though these relationships are flourishing. And some of that's about a need to care for one another, isn't it? That's kind of, we're very aware of each other's needs in a way that, we might not be in other circumstances.
Yeah. I think when the church emerges from this, Stewart, we have to ask ourselves, what have we done? What's our legacy been to our local parish or to the nation or whatever? And the churches that will emerge from this with a newfound zeal and a credibility within the parish will be the ones who cared for each other. Did we care for each other in the way Christ calls us to care for one another? And secondly, were we able to adapt with our innovation and reach out to people through worship in new forms and new expressions? And I think that ultimately is what it comes down to. It's how did we care for each other, and were we able to innovate with our worship and reach out to people and recreate that sense of community?
What do you think happens next? At some point, restrictions will be eased. You asked the question earlier on, should we be going back into our churches? That, that's not, you're not the first person to raise that as a real question. There's a real danger that it's not really been long enough to establish new patterns. That everybody just wants to get back to normal as soon as they can, and given the chance next week, that's what folk would primarily do. Except we've created some new ways of being, which seem to be really good. So where do you see the future going? It's going to be a while before church is allowed to go back in any kind of sense because of the nature of what we do, I think, and partly also because of the demographics of most church communities, that we have lots of people who are older. So some of them will be perhaps kept indoors a little bit longer than perhaps some younger folks. So what do you think that looks like over the coming months and even year, in terms of where you might focus your attention and what people will be looking for? And
well, I think in the short term, Stuart, it was quite interesting. I did a little straw poll just amongst some of my Kirk session, and I said to them, supposing we're following the German model and we're going back and it's 20 people in the congregation and there's no singing and there's social distancing and there's got to be a deep clean of the building afterwards and so on. After they had asked all the usual questions about, well, where does the kind of corporate responsibility lie if something goes wrong and all those things, the general feeling was, well, that's not church.
Yeah.
So the question was then, well, do we go back with those restrictions? And 100, I maybe asked 8 or 9 of them, but all of them said no, absolutely not, because that is not church.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as in their minds, what that told me is that in their minds, the redefinition of church has already taken place. It's online, and it's not 20 people meeting in a church building on a Sunday 3 times throughout the day, and they would rather say, no, we're not doing that, we're sticking with the online stuff. That was quite interesting for me. That was quite a wee interesting exercise, just to hear what they thought about that.
Yeah.
In the medium term, I don't know, I would probably always go back to asking the Kirk session. I'm always into empower the Kirk session. They're the spiritual leaders within the church. They're the ones who've got to grapple with these issues. I sent a questionnaire out to them this morning to say, what does outreach look like with an online community? What does finance look like with an online community? How do we do an offering with an online community? What does education and discipleship look like? And I would do the same thing in the course of time. We would have to grapple with issues like what does church look like once we go back? It's almost like replanting church. We're replanting church, and so we have to think very seriously about what that actually means and what it looks like, and whether we just go back to the old ways of doing things, or are we really going to sit down and ask, where are we going?
Yeah. What
does church look like? There'll be churches who come through this, Stuart, who have to grapple with issues like, do we need a building?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've spoken to colleagues who are saying to me that, and it's maybe folks who've got particularly aging congregations, and they're saying to me, in the last 8 weeks, they have watched their older folk, that golden generation, they have watched that group age considerably because of social distancing.
Yeah.
And there has been a debilitating effect on the physical, mental and emotional well-being of those folks, because they're not being able to go to their coffee morning at the church on a Tuesday, their Wednesday lunchtime service, their Sunday morning service. And those colleagues are seriously worried that when we do go back, that group will simply not be able to go back to church. And then the other group who will not want to go back because they have a fear of what viruses might still be present. So that raises huge issues for the church in terms of buildings and worship and presbytery planning and all that kind of thing. For Motherwell South, I think the first thing that we would have to do is have a discussion about, right, we're getting wind of the fact that we're possibly about to go back to some degree of normality. Right, folks, let's define what does that look like? What do we think that looks like? And have a period of prayer. It's almost that Saturday in between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. It's that period of preparation for resurrection. But what does resurrection look like?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because resurrection didn't look like more of the same.
Exactly.
Which is I think the mistake that we always make, isn't it? That it's just a period where everything's a bit rubbish again, and then it'll all be all right. And by being all right means it'll just be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. But
we
is
have
that Bible reading where Mary goes to anoint the body at the tomb, and he's not there, and she's distraught, and then she hears his voice, and she goes to grab him, she goes to hug him, and he says, no, don't hold on to me, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
It's that realization for the church that we cannot hold on to what used to be. Resurrection takes a different shape. Resurrection means we take a different direction. So that, I think, has huge implications for the church, and we have to grapple with that. That's not something that, as ministers, we necessarily provide answers to. We have discussions with our kirk sessions about what that means.
One of the accidents of what has happened is that lots of people have found that they are able to engage with people who couldn't come to church, not that who didn't want to, but who couldn't, by providing lots of alternative ways of engaging with the service. But one of the groups, I suppose, we've talked about creating online content and all of that kind of stuff, but there's a group of people who aren't online and can't be online for a whole range of different reasons. So how have you been engaging with them beyond their elders phoning them? Is that the kind of primary sort of pastoral care? Have you been able to engage with them in terms of worship at all?
Yeah, we've taken two approaches to it. The first one was that some of our elders, again, just off their own back, phoned those people and played the service down the phone to them. Now, I know you can do you can set up, there's a software package you can use where you can phone in and listen to the service, but this was much more crude. Those elders were just phoning the folk and saying, right, here's my laptop, I've got the phone next to the volume, listen to it. And I thought, gosh, that's a pretty poor show, but actually, the people were phoning me saying, oh, I listened to the service on Sunday, oh, I was so glad to listen to the service. So it was more the fact that they were included in it that meant a lot to them. Now, the last few weeks we've been a wee bit naughty. We've started taking laptops to houses where people don't have Wi-Fi, and we try to do it as safely as possible. We get permission from the family. We wipe down the laptop. The person goes with the mask and the gloves. The MP4 files on the laptop. They press the play button. They leave the laptop on the door outside. Ring the bell. And so the people are still able to watch the service even if they have no internet in their house. And again, that has been very positive. I went to see an old man on Sunday to pick up a laptop from him, and he was in floods of tears because it was the first time in 7 weeks that he'd been to work. He'd been to worship. He'd actually been to church, and seeing everybody involved in the service, just had a huge impact on him. So that might be the way to go. We emailed all the elders and said, tell us who in your district does not have the internet.
Yep.
Got a really good response from the elders. They all came back within 1 week, Stewart, and said, here's the folk who don't have it. We scrambled together tablets, laptops, iPhones, got the MP4 files put onto them, and we've got a wee group, a wee team who now go out and deliver those, usually on a Sunday afternoon.
That's fantastic. Just again meeting a need in a kind of creative way, isn't it?
Yeah. I spoke to one lady this morning who's 84 who told me that she's getting the internet into her house, and that was just because her elder said to her. To a degree, the elders who've taken the slightly more direct approach have actually done the right thing, and they've said to folk in the district, you need the internet. Yeah. This virus is not going away. It's going to be here for a while. You need to adapt. So we need to get you the internet somehow or another, because if you can get that, we can then get you a tablet and get you sorted out. And this wee lady phoned me this morning to say, Alan, that's me. I'm on the internet. Right, great, wonderful.
We've discovered a whole load of people that said they weren't on the internet that actually are.
Yeah.
There's some sneaky users. Lots of grandparents who, no, I'm not on the internet, but I talk to my grandchildren on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What are you doing? Are you doing anything in the way of reaching out to folk who don't have internet?
No, we're just ignoring them completely. We're using the fancy phone software thing mostly. That was our kind of first step. We've offered actually printed services for folk, and one person asked for them. So done the same thing as you. We kind of said to our elders, here's a range of options that we can help folk with. We can drop off CDs, we can give folk a printed copy or the telephone line, and most people were quite happy with the telephone line. But I do like the kind of slightly lower tech approach to that, where somebody phones up and says, right, I'm going to play you the service, because there's an introduction to it, rather than getting the electronic voice on the phone that says, hi, welcome to St Ninian's service, wait a moment and a file will start. Somebody phones you up and says, hi, how are you? Do you want to hear the service today? That's a different...
Sharing it more, isn't it? It's a sharing of faith and a sharing of a conversation with somebody rather than automated. Which is... it can be 5 seconds, it can be 10 seconds, but that to somebody means an awful lot more, like you said, Stuart, than an automated voice. Not that has its place as well, of course. I'm not rubbish.
But it doesn't bring people into community. It makes them content consumers.
Yeah, content consumers. Yeah, like that kind of. Yeah, absolutely. You're creating hashtag content every day. Like, okay, fine, but what does that mean to people, and how do you then engage with them off the back of it? Is the next thing you need to think about, as well as how you get it to them. It's that whole vicious.
I've told this story already when we were talking to somebody else, but I met somebody that comes to church every week. I was out with the dogs a couple of nights ago, and she said, oh, hi, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm doing okay. What are you doing now that the church is shut? That kind of, what do you mean, what am I doing now the church is shut? You should have had 5 phone calls by now from your elder with a range of options. We're creating content everywhere, we're doing all this stuff. And she hadn't, either somebody had told her, and at that point, which happens all the time, we tell people stuff all the time, and because they don't want to hear it at that point, it's it's not appropriate, or whatever, they just it doesn't stick. But there must be loads of people that don't know what we're doing, even though they've had a phone call, they've been told, or they don't have the internet, or they do now, but they don't know how to get it and all that. So I think some of that's about not assuming that folk know. One of the things we've been quite proactive at, that because of the nature of Stonehouse, it's a village town. 6,000 people, I think, live here now. But it's still quite a discreet community. So it has like its own Facebook group and all that kind of stuff, where everybody talks about each other and all that kind of stuff. But it's really good to let people know what's happening on, so we can post information on that, and folk will, say what they want to say about it. But some people will take that and they'll tell their mum and dad, or they'll tell their granny that, oh, there's a phone line thing that you can phone, or there's, you could get a CD, you could, and people are proactive in that. And I think you're right, that the kind of, some of that has come, or their willingness to do that has come off the back of seeing that the church has been proactive in caring for the community. And so now they're much more likely to do that than maybe they were 8 weeks ago. Because, they've seen that we set up a support group and people are getting messages for folk in prescriptions, and the church is underneath that. It's not, oh, look at us, we're doing this amazing thing. We didn't even put the logo on the postcard. It's people know. We got some tablets for the kids at school that didn't have them, and so there's, folk find out these things, and then the goodwill makes it more likely that then they'll tell people who don't see that kind of stuff, that and because they realise it's important to their parents and their auntie, or their, whoever it is that they're talking to. One of the things we touched on earlier on is this idea that internet doesn't respect borders and boundaries. And Kenny was telling me that one of the things that you've been able to do is contact or be in contact with a church in America. So how's that kind of come about, and how's that relationship kind of building?
Yeah, again, one of those little surprises that happens during this online worship, where I had friends who had moved to America a number of years ago, and occasionally I'd tune into their worship, and I'd listen to their service. They did a lovely piece on Easter Sunday where they had a choir singing, and so we asked if we could borrow that for our worship, and I cut it out of their YouTube upload and put it into our service. And that really began this communication between the two churches. They came back to us and watched our service that Sunday, and who knows where it will go. I mean, it's just one of those really bizarre things where they sent us this lovely email through our Facebook page to the congregation to say, we're praying for you in Scotland. We're thinking about you. We're very aware of what's going on in Scotland. Please pray for us. Here's our situation in Baltimore, and I do firmly believe that something will come from that. It will be in the months and years ahead. We've been talking again. This one goes back to what we were saying earlier on about, as a church, we've been talking about so many things for the last 15, 20 years. At Motherwell South, for the last 4 years, we've been talking about having relationships with churches from elsewhere around the world, and how do we foster that? Is it through the twinning program at 121, or is it through something else? And we seem to have gone round all the houses and not actually done anything with it. And then suddenly, completely out of the blue, this happens. And I thought, yeah, okay, right. God is in control here. And it looks to me as if we're going to emerge from this with a wonderful new relationship with this church, Presbyterian Church in Baltimore.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
I love when things like that happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it as we said earlier on, there is something really really amazing about all of this. It's such a difficult time for so many people, and I think, it's hard to get away from that, and we shouldn't get away from that there are a lot of things that have been really, really problematic, and that people are suffering. And, you talked earlier, Alan, about people aging and all kinds of, we don't know the impact of staying inside for 10 weeks. By the time we get to a point where some of the restrictions might be loosened just a little bit, we won't know, and we won't know some of them for years. And the impact that that's had on our carers and our health staff, and all that kind of stuff that we just don't know about. But undoubtedly, some of it's been really positive. That who would have thought a global pandemic would have had so many positive, potentially, outcomes? That it does force us to be creative. It forces us to be compassionate and considerate. It forces us to look beyond ourselves to our neighbour's need. And it's just, I can't get my head around the difference. Certainly, I mentioned before that Sunday before lockdown, I felt incredibly anxious, kind of looking around at a group of people who were mostly in their 70s. None of the young people came that week to our church. It was all the older folk that turned up because, nobody's going to tell us we can't go to church. And just being really, really concerned about them, that knowing that we were about to enter a period of lockdown, that they were statistically more at risk, all that kind of stuff. And yet here we are having a conversation about worship that's reaching twice or three times as many people as might do on a Sunday morning. Our elders getting to know the people that they've been visiting for years but didn't really know. The same has been true for children and young people, that we've been able to maintain and develop those relationships in ways that we probably wouldn't do coming to Sunday school or youth clubs every week and all that kind of stuff. There's so many positive things. It would be a real shame to, I think, like you had said, just to ditch all of that and just go straight back to whatever normal used to be, because normal wasn't working. We need to not forget that. I think that's the danger, that because it was comfortable and we've missed it, doesn't mean that it was good and that we should embrace it.
Do you think there's a risk, Stuart, that we're so keen to embrace what used to be that we rush back on a Sunday morning and we have that first few weeks bubble and then it bursts? Do you think that might happen?
I think there's a real danger of that. And I think, for all the right reasons, I think people want to see each other. They want to sing. I think that's one of the things that has surprised people, that, will not be able to sing together is a thing that they've really missed. And some of that, some of it's good stuff. Having a coffee morning on a Tuesday, that, there's nothing wrong with that. That's good stuff. That's about community and developing that relationship and all that kind of stuff. But there is a real danger that we just, that was really exhausting. Let's, I'm glad that's all over. Let's get back to 5 hymns and 3 prayers and a sermon on a Sunday, because
that's what we know and love.
That's what we know. Yeah.
You know it. That's the difference.
Yeah. It's comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a self-selecting audience. We've, talked about that previously, that, the people that turn up on a Sunday morning are people that like it. There's no other reason for them to be there. Nobody's making them go anymore. So if the people that come, but to a large extent, it's a self-selecting audience. It's people who do like it, can come, can be bothered getting up to go on a Sunday morning, all that kind of stuff. Whereas we've realised in a very short space of time, there's another whole group of people out there who are interested, who do want to be involved, but maybe don't want to do that Sunday morning thing.
Yeah.
We just can't walk away from that.
Mm-hmm.
I hope.
You have the conversations in Kirk sessions, you have the conversations at the General Assembly, at Presbytery all the time, that says we cannot say that church is only on a Sunday. We are now a 24/7 population. The church isn't the same as it was 10 years ago. Church isn't the same as it was 6 months ago now.
Not the same as it was 6 weeks ago.
Exactly. It's one of these things where you have to turn around and say, right, we need to do this in a way that's accessible to everybody that would like to access it. And that is potentially a totally different way of doing church. Now, that's not saying a Sunday morning doesn't happen, but it's saying, right, what do we do differently during the week? Do we do a Saturday night service because that's when young people want to come along? Do you do a midweek service for parents or for couples who work shifts, and those are the nights that they can attend and they can't do week? It's like you said, Alan, it's that whole period of the sermon. It's that Saturday between the Friday, Good Friday and Easter Sunday. What's that discernment period going to look like? How long is it going to take? How long are we going to have to pray and think and wait for that to come from all of this? And then saying, right, what do we do differently? How do we do it differently? And who takes it forward? Because ultimately, I think a lot of people are going to end up with different callings out of this as well.
Yeah.
And people are going to be saying, do you know what? What I used to do in this congregation isn't what I want to do everybody has their jobs. They're all we use pigeonholes for elders, for goodness sake. Everybody's pigeonholed in the Church of Scotland. That's how it works. Your property, your finance, your business, your this, your that. No. Just stop, hold your horses and say, do you know what? Everybody has their place, and it doesn't need to be where we say it is or where we think it needs to be. And that's how we should start to think about it. And it's that age-old pool of talents, pool of stewardship, pool of everything to say, do you know what can you offer now? Because we did that talent thing about a year ago, Alan, 18 months ago, when we kind of went through the whole congregation, Stewart, and we said, right, what do you have? What would you like to do? Of all these different things, how can you help us? What experience have you got? And that led to people with loads of skills that we had no idea about getting involved in things like property. So we've got a health and safety expert who's now on the property committee. We've got X, Y, and Z who can play the guitar or the drums, whatever it is. But now you say, okay, where do they fit in the new world? Where they don't fit? Maybe you didn't fit in the old church, but how do you fit in the new church, and what do you want to try? And what do you want?
That's an interesting one, Kenny, because one of the greatest joys that I have had ministering in Motherwell South presently has been that over the last 8 weeks, I have watched 1 or 2 people in the congregation who would never have taken on a leadership position at Motherwell South because, there was a particular group who always did that kind of thing.
Exactly.
They're coming forward to take on leadership positions because they don't have to necessarily interact face-to-face with people. And it tends to be millennials. It's some of the younger ones in our congregation who are saying to me, Alan, shall I do this for you? Shall I take over the Facebook page for you, for example? Now our Facebook page has become the shop window for our ministry. It's almost like being the editor of our Facebook is essentially a worship leader all of a sudden, because they're having to discern what goes onto Facebook, what time it goes onto Facebook, whether the content is good, bad, or indifferent, and whether it should be ditched. Because we're getting a lot of requests, can you put this on Facebook? And so if someone come forward and say, well, actually, I do Facebook quite a lot, I know my way around Facebook, I would like to do that for you. And I know that person would never normally take on a position in the church. You think, wow, goodness me. And she's brilliant at it. She's really good at it.
Yeah, fantastic.
One of the big concerns about, the request, we talked about the request that everybody should go and create a fresh expression. Now, to create a worshipping community is just a ton of work. It's a long-term investment in a group of people. And the question that most congregations, I think, had around that is, that's a great idea. Who on earth is going to do it? Because we're just managing to keep this on the road at the moment. We don't have the capacity to free up our minister or anyone else to go and do all of this stuff. But it seems as though in this scenario, what we've been able to do is to encourage a whole load of people to start taking part, which does free up some time to do a bit of thinking and to look long term, and I think, I'm really, really encouraged to hear that you are asking people what they think, which is something that traditionally ministers are terrible at. I remember saying that at my very first Kirk session meeting here at Stonehouse. I'm really interested in what you think of a Sunday. I want feedback on my preaching. I want you to tell me if you think it is good, bad, or indifferent, and all that. And they just kind of thought, what are you talking about? You want us to come and...
You want the Kirk session to be seen and heard? That's not what we do.
You want us to have an opinion?
Yeah. And I want you to have an opinion about me, and I want you to come and tell me, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because the only way I've never done this before. This is my first job in this kind of role. How on earth can I get any better at it if we don't have, kind of constructive feedback on that? I'll just assume that you like it and keep doing it, unless you tell me otherwise. So to be proactive in that, and to in the middle of what I think a lot of people are just surviving in, so there's the kind of keeping the show on the road kind of thing, which I think maybe is starting to kind of come to a bit of an end. I think I kind of feel over the last couple of weeks that I've settled into something of a kind of new pattern, and the week is different, but it it has some kind of regularity to it now that it didn't have before. It was just kind of like, all right, I need to make stuff, and I need to get video from people, and I need to do this, and I need to do that, and none of it had any kind of structure. And so there was very little time to think. So to be proactive in that, and to say to people, how is this for you? What do you think of it? Where do you think it should go? What are the bits that we should keep, we should ditch? What's next? I think is still the huge question. How does this look in terms of discipleship? How do we encourage people who are lurking on the edges of the Facebook world or YouTube or whatever? We can't even see who they are, but they're watching every week, and they're there, and they're consuming this content, and they're interested enough to keep coming back. How do we encourage them to be engaged rather than distant? And I think one of the ways to do that is to back to that, creating that context that they'll see that conversation. They'll see that people are able to contribute. They'll see that it's not the same faces every week. They'll see that people feel able to share how they feel and tell their stories, and that just creates an amazing context, I think, for people to feel as though that might be something I could get involved in. I feel as though, I'm not so very different from those people, because it's an array of different people. It's not the same kinds of people that are up every week. It's not, and that makes a huge difference. People, they talk about advertising, about projecting so people can see themselves in the advert kind of thing.
Yeah.
And church has been terrible at that. So unless you're, a 75-year-old white man or woman, in a heterosexual relationship, then it's really difficult to imagine yourself into that. And yet here we are, all across the world at the click of a button.
Yeah, one of the interesting things we did, Stuart, just in relation to that was, I think it was 3 weeks ago, we asked people, specifically those who were our online congregation and not previously part of our offline congregation, our Sunday morning attendees, to put together a small selfie video and to send it to us, just outlining who they were, where they were from, and any message they wanted to share with the congregation. Now, we put it out on Facebook on the Monday morning, a request for people to engage with us at that level, because we wanted to start seeing who is actually out there. We know there are folk watching worship, but how do we create a relationship with them? We were amazed when we had folk from Switzerland appeared in the Sunday service, the States, 2 folk from the States, in fact, folk from throughout Scotland, Glasgow, Lanarkshire, just absolutely incredible. Now, some people had a tenuous link with the congregation in the past. Other folk didn't. They'd stumbled upon the worship service. And so it was an eye-opener for the congregation, because the congregation who were listening to worship that day hadn't appreciated just how vast the online congregation had become and how diverse it was and how geographically widespread it was. So it was quite a good way of actually saying to the existing congregation, look, things have changed dramatically here. Now, the challenge going forward, again, going back to your point, is where does discipleship take place in that? How are we enabling people to deepen their faith? How do we do that? And I don't know. I grapple with that a lot, because as soon as I start to grapple with it, I find myself imposing my way of doing things upon it. Oh, we'll need to do this. We come up with a plan, and actually, maybe I'm denying God's Spirit as soon as I start to plan. Maybe in actual fact, God's Spirit is already at work in the lives of those people, and through the context in which they find themselves and the engagement they have with the online community, they're already asking themselves questions of faith and deepening their faith. I don't know. I don't have answers to it.
It's that need to stop and not rush in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To say, do you know what? How are we doing this already? It's clearly working because it's clearly reaching people, and you need to just leave it alone. It's the adage that I can't remember when it was. I think one of the last times I preached. Have you ever thought about the disciples in the boat during the storm? When Peter walked in the water, have you thought about the disciples on the boat who were wrestling with that storm, pulling trying to sort out the sails, trying to keep that boat afloat? Sometimes you just need to be that person who's doing what they've always done and doing it well enough to try and protect their friends and protect the community that you've got, rather than stepping out and doing that. You need to just hold back and say, do you know what? I'm going to stay in the boat for now, and the step out comes later. Mm-hmm. I don't need to rush out, and I don't need to do this, and I don't need to do that. And it kind of goes against every sort of emotion that people have when it comes to sharing faith and sharing with people who are new. You want to talk. Yes, you do, but slow down, put the brakes on and say, this is your time. It's nothing to do with me. It's God's time. And saying that, and again, it goes back to discernment. It goes back to being able to say, right, we've started something, but we need to be led and not thrust ourselves upon it, and just say, right,
absolutely,
what's coming next? Who's coming next? Is it Pittsburgh, Baltimore, is it Geneva instead of, what's is the big question. And you know what? I don't think we'll find it ourselves.
You're right.
Of course not. And perhaps because it's online, we try and speed that up because everything's quick, and we've been through a period of time that's been really quick. We've had to adapt very, very speedily to what's been going on around about us. But in real life, I've said, my supervisor asked me before Christmas, where do you feel you're at? And I said, I feel like I'm at the end of the beginning. So almost 3 years here, I feel as though I'm actually getting to know people. So why do we feel after 2 months that...
it's almost like the end of the beginning of lockdown is what everybody seems to be trying to impose, and you're like, no, it's not.
It's not. It takes a long time to establish a relationship with people and for them to trust us and for us to trust them and to get to know who they are and what they're about and all that kind of stuff. So, I think that we can sometimes be a bit quick because we want it. We want results.
You want numbers, don't you? It's the number adage that Alan had earlier. It's not about that. Yeah. It's about, if we can say, as a result of what happened in lockdown, we've reached people more than we ever have. It's been a success. Yeah. You don't need to worry about how many people come on a Sunday. You don't need to worry about how many people tune in or who downloads what or whatever. If we've been able to minister successfully to those people at the same time as continuing to minister to our congregations and look after them during it, because let's be honest, the vast majority of every congregation in Scotland is full of people who should be self-isolating for up to 12 or 16. If we're able to come out at the end of this and say, we served them and we were Christ for those people, it's been a success. Mm-hmm. You don't need to worry about numbers and chasing likes and chasing content and all of that. It's all great stuff. I'm not going to disagree with that. And, the podcast's a perfect example of this. But it's a way to say this is Christ's kingdom and it's changed. And it will continually change. And we need to be better at doing that.
Yeah.
That seems like a good place to finish. Alan, thanks so much for giving us your time. It's been a brilliant conversation. So I hope you continue to feel that God's leading you in this new adventure that we find ourselves in, and many blessings on you and the folk at Motherwell South.
Thanks, Stewart. I really appreciate that, and thanks, Kenny, as well. It's been great to chat to you both. And likewise, Stewart, I hope things at Stonehouse continue to flourish, and I hope that this podcast has an impact on those who are listening to it.
Shut up and sit down.